Imagine walking into an exam hall. Everyone around you is nervous, flipping pages, trying to remember things they studied all night. But you sit down calmly because the information is already locked inside your mind. Sounds impossible? Well, surgeons do this every single day. A surgeon doesn't just memorize one chapter or one topic. They memorize thousands of anatomical structures, procedures, drug names, and clinical steps. One small mistake could cost a life. So how do they remember everything? They use a memory technique so powerful, it almost feels illegal. It's called the memory palace. This technique dates back more than 2,000 years and is used by top surgeons, medical students, and memory champions around the world. Here's how it works. Your brain is terrible at remembering random information, but it's unbelievably powerful at remembering places. You may forget what you studied yesterday, but you can easily remember the layout of your home, your school corridor, or the path from your bedroom to the kitchen. That's the secret. Surgeons take the information they want to remember and attach it to places they already know. For example, imagine you want to memorize the bones of the arm. Instead of repeating them again and again, you imagine walking into your house. At the front door, you see a giant humerus bone standing like a guard. When you walk into the living room, two bones are lying on the sofa, the radius and ulna. Then in the kitchen, the carpal bones are scattered on the table like coins. Now your brain connects information with locations, and suddenly, memorization becomes effortless. This is why medical students can recall entire procedures step by step. They're not just memorizing words, they're walking through a mental building full of information. But here's the part most students miss. This trick only works if you actively visualize. Don't just read your notes. Turn them into crazy, exaggerated mental images. Make them weird. Make them funny. Make them unforgettable, because the brain remembers emotion and imagination far better than plain text. Think about it. Your brain has the power to store billions of memories. The problem isn't your intelligence. The problem is that nobody ever taught you how to use your brain properly. But once you start learning like this, studying stops feeling like torture and starts feeling like unlocking a superpower. So the next time you sit down to study, don't just read. Build a memory palace and turn your mind into a library where nothing is ever lost. Because the students who win in life are not always the smartest. They are the ones who learn how to learn. Now here's where things get even more powerful. The memory palace is only the first layer of how top medical students and surgeons remember massive amounts of information. The second trick they use is something called active recall. Most students study like this. They read their notes, highlight everything, and then read it again. It feels productive. But in reality, your brain is doing almost no work. And if your brain isn't working, it isn't learning. Surgeons train their brains differently. Instead of asking, "Can I recognize this information?" they ask, "Can I retrieve this information without looking?" That small change makes a massive difference. Here's how you can use it. After studying a topic, close your book. Then ask yourself, what were the 3 most important ideas I just learned? What are the steps of this process? Can I explain this concept like I'm teaching someone else? If you can answer those questions without looking, your brain has truly learned it. If you can't, that's not failure. That's your brain telling you exactly where to focus next. This is why medical training works so well. Doctors don't just read textbooks. They constantly test themselves. They explain concepts. They visualize procedures. They repeat the process until the knowledge becomes automatic. And here's something important most students never realize. Your brain isn't like a hard drive. It's more like a muscle. The more you challenge it to recall information, the stronger those memory connections become. That's why the smartest students don't always study the longest. They study the smartest. So imagine combining both techniques. First, build a memory palace to store the information. Then, use active recall to pull that information out again and again. That's how you turn short-term studying into long-term mastery. And when you start using these techniques consistently, something amazing happens. Studying stops feeling overwhelming. Your confidence grows, your memory sharpens, and slowly you begin to realize something powerful. Your brain was never the limitation. You just needed the right system. Now, if you really want to unlock the full potential of your brain, there's one final technique that surgeons and top medical students rely on. It's called spaced repetition. And this is where most students make their biggest mistake. They study something today, maybe review it once tomorrow, and then they completely forget about it until the exam is a week away. By that time, most of the information is already gone. Why? Because your brain naturally forgets information over time. This is known as the forgetting curve. But spaced repetition breaks that curve. Instead of cramming everything at once, you review the information at specific time intervals. For example, study a topic today, review it again tomorrow, then review it again after 3 days, then again after 1 week, then again after 1 month. Every time you revisit the information, your brain strengthens the memory, and eventually it becomes almost impossible to forget. This is how surgeons remember procedures they learned years ago, not because they are born geniuses, but because they train their brains using systems that actually work. Now think about what you've learned in this video. First, Memory Palace helps you store information visually. Second, active recall forces your brain to retrieve that information. And third, spaced repetition locks that knowledge into long-term memory. 3 simple techniques, but when combined, they become incredibly powerful. And here's the truth most students never hear. Success in studying isn't about studying harder, it's about studying smarter. Your brain already has the capacity to learn more than you think. You just need the right tools to unlock it. So the next time you sit down with your books, don't just study like everyone else. Train your brain like the people whose knowledge saves lives. Because once you learn how to learn, there is almost nothing you can't master. And that is the real superpower of every great student.